Hi everyone and welcome to Caravel Gaming. I'm Boomer and today we're going to be going through a Hex Draft that I recently did. What we're going to focus on in this draft is we're going to focus on a couple of things. The first thing is cutting a colour in a draft, and you'll notice me doing this throughout the thing. And then second, we're going to look into some mistakes that I see a lot of players who probably aren't familiar to a TCG this complex making. In this first booster that we've got here, the only card that I'm really super interested in is the Genesis Hydra. It's a tremendous bomb, pretty much. It's a 4/4 for 4 mana that when it's dealt damage it permanently gets +1/+1. There were some notable cards in that pack, Wind Whisperer being 1 in Diamond. There was also a Sapper's Charge, but nothing really on the power level of this Genesis Hydra. So what I've got is I've got the whole draft recorded, and we are going to go through the draft pick by pick, and then I will go through the games that I played with it, and hopefully noting some of the areas where I think that some players are definitely making mistakes. You'll often hear Ribbo, myself and Lee refer to something that we call the idiot test, and it's a rather unfortunate name for it, but you will see a couple of players fail that during this. Some notable picks here. Notable Citizenry is really good. Wild Aura's fine as well. But there are only a couple of green cards in this pack. Nothing's really that spectacular. I mean, Noble Citizenry is amazing, but I'm not sure whether it's worth diverting into a second colour immediately due to it being double Diamond as well as the Genesis Hydra being double Wild. So I'm perfectly happy to pick up a Howling Brave here. Wild decks tend to do very, very well when they have Howling Braves in them, or some kind of acceleration to get their guys online. Interesting choice here. I have a Briar Legion, which would allow me to completely cut green. As you can see, it looks like no one's drafting Diamond or at this point. There are some very good picks left in this pack. Citizenry's fine. Buccaneer's really good. Burn is obviously really good as well. Immortality isn't exactly bad either. So again, I could get involved if I wanted to. I could get involved in a fight over all of those colours. Obviously, I passed 2 Noble Citizenries now, so going into Diamond now would probably be a mistake. So what I chose to do was cut Wild entirely in that pack. There are no wild cards left in it. Briar Legion's a fine card, especially if you get, I think really I would probably say that the border for me playing Briar Legion would probably be somewhere in the region of, I'd want 3 of them in my deck before I started thinking of playing them, really. Again, good Diamond cards coming through here. Blinding Light is fine. It's a nice combat trick. Well, not a combat trick, it's more a tempo trick than anything else, because it your opponent can, like, if you're in a race situation and your opponent sort of alpha strikes with all his guys into you, you can prevent all the damage and then swing back, essentially getting 2 attack phases in a row. Or you can use it to like get a very favourable trade in your favour. So it's a decent card for sure. Here I have a choice of picking up the Sensei, which is a 1/1 to draw a card, but it's not really the type of card that I want in a wild-based deck. Effigy of Nunzan is actually really underrated, I think, because of its ability to be socketed. You really have to realize that the effigy is actually potentially as many as 10 different cards because of the ways that it can be socketed. It can be a 2/2 with flight, it can be a 2/2 with swift strike, it can be a 2/2 with haste. Being a mono wild deck as we are at the moment, it can also be either just a straight up 3/3 or it can be a 2/2 with spell shield. You saw me pick up a Survival of the Fittest there. I think that this is really the glue that holds sort of mono wild decks together. Vine Trap I'm a big fan of. 3 mana for a 2/4 is a really big body. I chose to take Wild Aura though, because Wild Aura is much more easily splashable in other decks because of its 1 wild mana cost. And also with Survival of the Fittest and various other green wild sort of tricks that can be done, Wild Aura, being a permanent +2/+2 is just really good. Again, we're going to cut the wild card here, and Howling Brave's a really good card, and everything else is pretty average. Monkey of the Ninetales is okay. Combos very well with Buccaneer, but I think that picking up a second Howling Brave here is fine. I think people really underestimate Survival of the Fittest in how good it is. If you can pick up just a few fat wild monsters, it basically is just a straight up removal spell, and given how early murder goes in drafts, you can pick up survivals like 7th, 8th, 9th pick sometimes, and I think that's way too late. I decided to take the Phoenix Guard Trainer here because it's a bit of a signal that not many people are in Sapphire, and also it can just be a nice little Sapphire splash just to give like some of your fat green guys a bit of flight. I pick up a second Survival of the Fittest there. Really, I wouldn't tend to run more than 2 or 3. It really depends on how the deck comes out. If I end up with sort of 6 or 7 guys who are like 4/4 or better, I will often play like more survivals. I choose to take the Effigy here again. Terrabot is actually perfectly playable even if you don't have any of the dwarves or robots to turn on its mana cost reducing ability. 3/5 flyers are very difficult to deal with, and if you have enough fat to hold the ground, or you have things like Swift Strikers, then Terrabot's a perfectly decent finisher. Turbulence is a nice pickup here. One of the decks that will give a mono wild deck problems is something like a Sapphire Diamond Flyers deck, and therefore you're going to want ways to actually deal with your opponent's flyers, because there aren't really that many ways in Wild, aside from Survival of the Fittest or something like that, to end up taking out flyers. I decided to take Turreted Wall here. It's actually better than most people give it credit for. If you're drafting a control deck like a Diamond Blood deck, or even Diamond Ruby or something like that, and yeah, no one's playing Ruby in this draft, it looks like. If you're playing something like, and yeah, we got the Vine Trap back, which is a huge bonus, so a little bit of a gamble paid off there. But if you're playing like a Blood Diamond deck or a Blood Ruby deck, the Turreted Wall can actually be an incredible addition to that deck, because not only does it hold the ground, it also acts as an artificial win condition while you wait for your smaller guys. So what do we have here? Well, we have another Phoenix Guard Trainer there. Not much else in Wild, but we do have this Crazed Squirrel Titan, which I would probably say is the best wild card. At least a non-rare wild card. There are some like foolish rares for Wild, but in terms of a card that you're likely to see in a draft, rather than get really lucky to see in a draft, I think Crazed Squirrel Titan's about as good as it gets. It's a 4/4 that when it comes into play, it punches another creature for its equal to its power. Both creatures essentially fight each other, and given it's 4/4, it's generally going to trade with whatever. It's either going to trade or beat up whatever it comes into play against. Pretty much a nothing pat here. The Guard Aeronaut's pretty good. It's again socketable, so don't just look at its normal stats. In a Wild Diamond deck, it's more than likely going to be a 4/3 fly for 5, which is obviously perfectly acceptable. You can also give it something like Swift Strike or Life Drain if you want to as well. I took the Time Ripple there because it is possible we're going to put a splash of Sapphire in the deck. There was nothing really in that pack for me, so I decided to take the Time Ripple because it can occasionally be quite good just to bounce your opponent's creature and just like smash him with a few guys and just gain that little bit of tempo back, because mono wild decks can sometimes have a bit of a problem if they get behind on tempo, because really all they're doing is just dropping guys. There's no real trick to anything else that they're doing. Again, really weak pack for Wild here. I don't really want to take a third Howling Brave. I don't think it's that necessary. There's not much in Sapphire either, so at this point I was beginning to get a little worried that someone just hadn't picked up on the signal at all that I'd sent in the first booster, but it is also just possible that there was just nothing in those packs, so I'm not panicking yet. Mesmerize is a perfectly decent spell. Taps the creature that you are... taps a creature, and that's about it. I'm thinking of taking a third effigy here. However, Wild Aura is just a complete beating, a really good combat trick that people can definitely fall into. I'm not sure I want a third 3/3 for 3, although that could be fine. I mean, I have 2 Howling Braves, so you know, a turn 2 3/3 is turn 2 3 power guy is never really a bad thing. And I sort of and ah about this a lot, but I just decide again I don't want to leave a wild card in that pack, and there we go. We actually get 2 pretty good wild cards here. Honeycap is better than Gigantosaur. I think the deck's lacking on 4-drops at the moment a little, and Honeycap's going to be your major one. I mean, let's face it, you're playing pretty much mono wild, so you're playing 1 colour, and if that colour's Honeycap, plus we have the 2 Howling Braves, I don't think there's anything that we're going to end up picking over Honeycap, to tell you the truth. I don't really want a third Wild Aura here. I'd rather have a third Survival of the Fittest than a third Wild Aura, and if Honeycaps are coming back round, I could have chosen to take a risk in that booster and taken the Gigantosaur, banking on the Honeycap coming back, because since I'm playing mono wild and I cut it so hard, it is very possible that it comes back. So that's maybe something I could have done. Shroom Tank is meh at best. I don't really have any way of pumping up the 0/1s that it puts in play when it comes in play. 5 mana 3/3 really isn't that impressive. I have 2 3 mana 3/3s in the deck already. The only way that I might play it is if I have a huge number of pumpers. I decided to take the Terrabot just because, as I said, if you can hold the ground, it's a decent finisher in the air. I probably won't end up playing it. I'm going to take the Evolve here. Once again, I'm proven wrong in a draft pick that I take because I have... how would you describe it? I have... if I'd have taken the Shroom Tank and therefore Evolve, just makes things a lot better on that front. Plus with the 2 Wild Auras, I suppose it could be a 5/5, but yeah, it's just... For me, drafting a mono wild deck, it is just that little bit behind the curve, and I don't want to be playing cards that are behind the curve in this deck. I want to be playing efficient cards. Okay, so let's move on. Absolutely nothing in this pack for us. I could take Infiltrator Bot, just again as an evasive guy, potentially put Wild Aura on it, make a 5/4 unblockable. I mean, that's something that could seem okay. I decided to hate the Corpse Fly here. I probably could have taken the Infiltrator Bot there. Again, I'm not going to play it. I actually don't think I'm going to take either, to tell you the truth. I just sorted myself by cost here because I was very tempted to take the Tyrannosaurus Hex there until I realised that I have pretty much no 2-drops. So therefore I would be relying horrendously on my Howling Brave turn 1. So I'll take a couple of guys there. Second Evolve or an Oracle Song. Again, there's still a very small outside chance I'm going to play Sapphire here, so I decided to take the Oracle Song. I think the Evolve might have been a little bit better. Again, I highly doubt I'm going to be playing either of those cards, to tell you the truth. They don't really fit into my overall strategy. I take the Sniper because the Sniper is going to be a pain, although once again it looks like no one is drafting Ruby at this table, so, you know, Bloodcrazed Zealot's a perfectly good card. In that sort of deck. Again, I don't think my picks matter too much here. I probably should have taken the Bloodcrazed Zealot there, to tell you the truth. I don't think anyone's on the Warbot, like the Warbot plan. I'll take the Shroom Shrew. Again, could be an irritating card for me because it gets in the way like 3 times of one of my guys who don't have Crush. And we take Runts of the Litter, so yeah. Pretty much the quintessential 15th pick. So what do we have here? We have Heroic Inspiration, which means that if a creature's blocking, it kills whatever it's blocking, pretty much. And again, not really much in the on the wild side here for us. Again, I'm going to take a bit of a punt here, because if we get another Briar Legion, then we could potentially have a little bit of a theme going there. And the only other card I'd really think about picking there was Feral Ogre, and I think Feral Ogre will table, mainly due to its difficult mana requirements. You can't really splash it because it's 2 mana, but it requires 2 Wild Threshold in order to play. So therefore, it's definitely something that I feel will table, and I just think that the upsides to potentially getting 3 or 4 Briar Legions override having a essentially first picking a 3/2 for 2. And well, that's a lot of Aeronauts that have gone past, so there's definitely going to be a white flyer deck out there, or a diamond flyer deck out there. Vine Trap, but Boulder Brute is pretty much the card which holds together, or at least it's the best I think it's between Boulder Brute and Honeycat for what I think is the best common for Wild. I think that Boulder Brute wins it because Honeycat needs to be in a very certain style of deck. 4/4 socketable for 5 is ridiculous. Usually you're going to put Spell Shield in that Boulder Brute, the Spell Shield gem. Just so it can't be targeted and it's very difficult to deal with. Again, a pretty much nothing pack for me here. I could take another Vine Trap. Again, there's another Blinding Light as well, so I've got to be careful. Again, real outside chance I'm playing Sapphire, and I think the Wendigo is better than any of the other options, so I decide to take it. I really am tempted to take Chimes of the Zodiac just for my collection, but because there's a Boulder Brute there, I'm going to take that. I don't really have a way to abuse Chimes of the Zodiac except with something like Wild Aura, which, while funny, is probably not practical. So therefore I'm going to take Boulder Brute and try and win the draft, because the deck's really coming together now. Those 2 Boulder Brutes are really going to help me. Great with Survival of the Fittest, great with Spell Shield, means they can't be repelled or buccaneered or anything like that. And we pick up a Honeycap here, which, yeah, this deck's really coming together now. All that cutting that we did in pack 1, it looks like it's having some kind of effect now, because we're getting strong wild cards being passed to us in this pack. So, just one of those important things. Sometimes it doesn't all come together, but if you do cut hard like we have done occasionally, you get away with things, and you get things like this happening where you get a 5th pick Crazed Squirrel Titan, which is absolutely ridiculous. There is just... sorry, that was 6th pick as well. There's no way that should happen if anyone at the table is playing Wild. But because we've cut so hard, it's really coming together now. And I think this deck, at the beginning of pack 2, I would say that this deck would have probably gone 1 win, might have been lucky to pick up a semi-final win. Now I think this deck is looking squarely at 3-0, because this, you know, those first 6 picks were just ridiculous. I don't think, you know, apart from like looking for rares, I don't think we could have structured those picks to be any better. So really our goal is just going to be make Fat Monster, Fat Monster, Fat Monster, punch anything out of the way using either Crazed Squirrel Titan or Survival of the Fittest, and just try and stomp over our opponents. Probably not going to play anything from this pack, but might as well take a Dino. We may end up playing 1, I suppose. It's one of the weaker drops, but you know, 6 power for 6 is always fine, and the fact it's got built-in Crush means that any sort of pump effects that we use are going to be quite good. At this point, I'm pretty much abandoning any pretense of playing Sapphire, and that the Feral Ogre table, just like I was hoping. So therefore, we've now got I've got a couple of 2-drops, a couple of 1-drops, so we do have at least some early curve. Our 3-drops are pretty strong. Get the Vine Trap. Vine Trap's really nice. We're probably not going to be able to play the Briar Legions because we've only picked up 2 and we haven't seen any others. So they're probably going to go by the wayside because a 2/2 for 3 is pretty bad. And alright, it'll inflate to a 4/4 if you draw the second, but you're just not really that likely to do that. I'd rather have the effigies, which are I'd rather have the effigies, which are 3/3s guaranteed. And to be honest, I'd rather have Vine Trap as well, because if you think about it, Vine Trap and Survival of the Fittest is actually surprisingly good. Just due to the fact that it will beat up pretty much any 3-drop. There are very few things which have 3 toughness and 4 power that are cheap in the early game. So there's not really much that's going to survive a Survival of the Fittest with that. And you can see here, there's definitely no way anyone's playing Ruby at this level because someone has just got a 14th pick Burn. A Burn is probably, as far as commons go, it's probably the 2nd best Ruby common, I would say. I would probably take, actually no, 3rd probably. I would probably take Ruby Pyromancer and Burn to the Ground over it. Aside from that, I think it's... so, you know, if that's going 14th pick, there's just no one at the table in Ruby. So, that's it. That's the draft done, at least. So, let's have a look at how we're going to construct the deck. When I am constructing decks, I generally just dump everything I'm thinking about playing into the deck builder and just see if we have to cut anything. At the moment, my mind is just permanently fixed on mono wild. So, let's see. Okay, so that's 21 cards there. I think this deck is 17 land, even though it has a fairly chunky top end at 6 mana. I do have 2 Howling Braves. I give some thought here to playing the Phoenix Guard Trainer and the Wendigo, but the problem with that being that I would probably have to... I would probably have to potentially screw over my mana doing that, and I think it's just a stronger idea to stick mono-coloured and take advantage of the honey caps. You know, every single shard that I make is going to be +1 to the honey cap. So, you know, let's just play it that way. Let's keep things simple. Means that we can't get colour screwed, which, you know, is one of the many ways you can lose a game of Hex. I do actually make a mistake with the champion I decide to take here. When I'm playing a wild based sort of slow grindy deck, I will often go for for Running Deer to gain 5 health, which I do here. However, what I should have realised is, because of the fact that Burn was going really late in that draft and various other things that just showed what was going on, I really don't need to be gaining the life because there won't be any rush decks out there. Because I have like the Survival of the Fittest, or 3 of them, and 2 Grey Squirrel Titans and all the rest of it, what I should have picked was the Shinhare, who gives +2/+2, and I actually make that change after round 1. Now, I missed game 1 of this on the recording, unfortunately, because I just forgot to turn the recording on, so I'm sorry. But basically what happened was my opponent failed the quote-unquote idiot test. He blocked my Feral Ogre with his 3/2 when I had 4 mana up, and I put Wild Aura on the Feral Ogre, killed his 3/2, and then had a 5/4 Trample or 5/4 Crush on board, and that was pretty much game over at that point because he had no way to deal with it. I ended up keeping that 6 card hand, mainly because I felt like the odds of drawing a single shard were better than my odds of winning if I mulligan to 5, and especially since I'm on the draw in this game, having won game 1, I felt that it was worth the risk. Vine Trap also on turn 2 is incredible, just because it just gives the whole like none shall pass, and that's pretty much it at that point. And I've drawn Perfect because I've drawn 2 shards, so this hand just became utterly ridiculous. So there we go, let's just make the Vine Trap. I can't remember the name of the champion that our opponent's playing there, but it's one that you generally see in control decks rather than aggro decks. It basically is, for 2 charges it pings your opponent for 1 and you gain 1 life. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of it. Here I'm just going to block. Usually this would be me failing the idiot test, but Mono Blood actually has no way of... Mono Blood really has no way of taking advantage of that situation, because the best it can do is Blood Aura, really, and that's pretty bad. I suppose it could double Sorrow, But, you know, if he wants to use 3 cards to kill one of mine, then I'm fine with that. So I've got a couple of options here. I could either just make Genesis Hydra and pass, take 5 and then work from there. I decide to see if I can fool him here, and I don't really like my decision. The reason for that being that I've already showed him Wild Aura in game 1. So really, if he's got any sense, he should not be attacking with that 5/4 when I have 4 mana up. Because you know, I'm representing Wild Aura, and that's a you know, big deal. So I should have just played the 4/4, assuming that he wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. However, he's made one mistake here, and that mistake is that he's played his guy pre-combat. If he'd have attacked without playing anything, I would have to worry about cards like Atrophy, which would really like wreck me if I tried this Wild Aura play. So really, I made what I consider to be a mistake by waiting on the Wild Aura rather than developing my board. But my opponent has made a my opponent's made a similar mistake here by casting his guy pre-combat, and you know, again, he could have Sorrow here, but he'd wipe his entire board and leave himself with 1 card. Plus, I have a follow-up as well, so I would really not be too upset about that. I'm not really sure I should have used my guy's ability there. Oh no, that's the game 5 life, isn't it? I haven't yet switched to the Shinari, so it's okay. You just game 5 whenever you can at that point. And now I'm just in a now this game's pretty much over. He's on 2 cards, and the fact is he's quit when I made a big guy in the first game, so it's more than likely he doesn't have Murder in his deck, and he probably doesn't have Terrible Transfer either. So the fact he's playing Mono Blood and doesn't have either of those cards basically makes me feel like he's got a pretty weak deck overall there. So I'm not really too surprised that that ended in a bit of a stomp. Anyway, we're going to move on to the semi-final now, and I do have the entire semi-final recorded. I do apologise for not having game 1, but it really was just a case of I attacked with the 3/2, he blocked with the 3/2 into my open 4 mana, I cast a spell, and he lost. These next few games will at least showcase, I think they'll showcase a bit more the power of a mono wild deck if you can get it online. This hand is pretty meh overall, but I have, you know, it's the classic shards and spells sort of hand. It's like, yes, I can cast everything in my hand, but it's really not the it's really not the sort of hand that I would want to see too much. So just wait for our opponent, and he's on wild as well, which surprises me a little because, you know, I got a 6-pick Cray Squirrel Titan. I don't really think, you know, unless this guy was directly next to me one way or the other, I don't think I should have seen that. Unless people just don't realise how powerful that card is, which is a possibility. Great draw for me there. At least I can play something before turn 2. Before turn 4. He is on... It's strange because look, usually when you see Shinari, you'd expect Blood Wild. Because he's on Diamond Wild, I won't see some of the more devastating Shinari like Hop Hero or the Shinari Eulogist. He could just be like Diamond Wild Beats, and I feel like a deck like this is going to be very, very dependent on its quote-unquote Lord cards. Basically things like the Bucktooth Commando, which is the 2/2 for 3, which gives all other Shinari +1/+1, and Command Tower as well. But because I have removal for those guys, aside from the Command Tower, of course, but because I have removal for most of his sort of dangerous stuff, if he's straight Shinari, then I'm really not that concerned. Cottontail Ronin's an interesting one. Unmolested, it can cause a major issue. But you'll see very shortly why I have changed to the +2/+2 champion, because let's just say it makes Vine Trap an unbelievable beating against aggro decks. Okay, so he's nipping in for 1. Have to acknowledge he has mulligan to he did mulligan to 6 in this game, I believe. He's got 3 cards in hand now. That guy is actually pretty good, Nelebrin Skirmisher. If it hits me, he'll get +1/+1, plus he's socketable, so there's a million different ways to get him through. If you're playing with Sapphire, you can give him flying. If you're playing with Wild, you can just make him bigger. If you're playing with Ruby, you can give him essentially Intimidate. You can make him not be able to be blocked except by wild troops or artifacts. If you're I can't remember what you can do if you're playing Blood. If you're playing Blood, you can probably give him Rage, which means you'll probably like punch through anything he has to. There's the command tower, something that I was kind of expecting from this deck, really. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So now we're going to have a plan of campaign. Now, if I had if I had Running Deer, I keep thinking of Feather Drifting Downer for some reason. If I had Running Deer, this would be a horrible situation for me now, because the 4/2 is just too big. I would have to block it this turn, and then I'd be left with something that would end up being like a 4-power Cottontail running. Whereas what my plan is here, depending on what he does, I think he's just thinking of how to structure his attacks at the moment. My plan here is to block the Cottontail Ronin. He's not got any mana open, so I don't need to worry about anything. Block the Cottontail Ronin, and then next turn pump my Vine Trap with my hero ability, and then Survival of the Fittest and kill what is now a 5/3. Otherwise, this would be a very, very awkward situation for me. So, you know, and I'm just going to leave him with like 2 1/1s, and I'm going to have a 2/4. So that's pretty awesome for me, really. I draw Wild Aura, which makes me contemplate a change in plans, but unfortunately I have to do it this turn, otherwise that 5/3 is going to get through. Also, I give him the chance to have a combat trick, like, or not even a combat trick, but a trick like Bravery or an Aura of his own, which would pretty much blow me out if I went for the if I went to Wild Aura my guy up and then just sit on it. I think that this is a much more I think it's a much easier play to make. I think it's also a much more tempo-y version, because I still get to play my 3/2, which means I get to develop my board, and it also means I still have the Wild Aura in hand, along with both the Honeycap and the Genesis Hydra. So really, as long as I stay in this game early and don't try and be incredibly greedy, I'm just going to win, because I have really fat monsters. Because at the end of the day, now we're looking at this board, I have a 2/4 and a 3/2 against a pair of 1/1s. I have 4 cards in hand, he has 2. I also have a bit more developed mana as well, so, you know, it's going to be very, very difficult for him to come back into this. Unfortunately for him, he is also a bit resource screwed at this point, so that's going to make things a bit more difficult. Roseline's an interesting play here. I'm not really sure about Roseline, never have been. It's a 0/1 for 2 that gets +1/+1 at the beginning of your turn, basically. However, it loses that ability whenever it attacks or blocks. So it's one of those cards which, if you leave it alone for ages, yes, it can be like a 5/6 or a 6/7. But that's really only if things go your way. And if things don't go your way and you're forced to block with it, you're left with like a really terrible creature. Okay. Now, I'm following a bit of a rule that I learnt when playing Magic here, and that's basically don't do anything in your first pre-combat main phase unless you don't have to. It it just allows you basically to have as many options open as possible. Yeah, and my opponent here is going to go for the he's going to try and kill my 3/2. I don't really understand why he's blocking the 2/4 there. Yeah, I mean, obviously he has the Heroic Inspiration here, which is fine, but that allows me to do a reverse blowout here with the Wild Aura. And the other thing is here, if I had another Survival of the Fittest, I could just kill his 1/1. And again, there's almost no way he isn't getting, alright, he gets to kill my 2/4, well done. But now his lion is permanently stuck on being, and what happened there was, and this is something I'd like to take up with the Hex guys, was, you'll notice I clicked a button after combat. That was actually to pass the turn, because at the end of combat you automatically go into the second post-combat main phase. And I don't like that. I'd rather be able to click through it, because as you can see, I've actually missed making a shard by doing that. But now the rose line, as you can see, is locked into being a 1/1 permanently, and I now have a 5/4. If I were him there as well, I would probably use the hero ability on the on one of the guys, just to make it look like I'm... See, and this is one of the things, because of the actual click through there, I can't play my Crazed Squirrel Titan, which would potentially get me off any sort of, +1/+1 effect here. So I'm really not happy at the way that... Now, I'm still attacking here. If he has repel, I have follow-ups. His board's just completely non-threatening, so I'm really not too worried about what's happening. And then I'll just make a Genesis Hydra, which again is bigger than his board. If he was going to sit back and try and block that, I would have just made one of my guys, give my guys +1/+1 permanently with his guy's ability. Because at least then he's threatening to kill my guy. Otherwise, he's just, he's literally just putting his guys back there in the hope that I won't attack into open mana. Which, I'm going to attack into open mana because I'm going to force you to play your cards, because you only have 1 or 2 in hand. And I actually have better threats than what's on the board in my hand. So I want to make you use your repel. There's really nothing I want to sideboard in here, so I'm going to... I'm just going to keep the deck as it is. I don't want to put in a second colour. There's no point. There's no point putting in Terrabot. Turreted Wall's a consideration, but I just think all the other cards in my deck are just better. I think that, the whole 3 Survival of the Fittest, 2 Crazed Squirrel Titan is what I'm going to win this game on. I could also just get a super curve with turn 1 Howling Brave, turn 2 Effigy, turn 3 Genesis Hydra or something like that, and I'm pretty sure he's going to find it almost impossible to come out with. And that's one of the things, it's okay building, it's okay just picking up all the fat and calling it a mono wild deck, but I also have early stuff here. You want to be taking stuff like Howling Braves, you want to be taking things like Chlorophilia, mainly because you want to be able to put your opponent on a clock and quickly. If you just do nothing for the first 3 or 4 turns and then ponderously make guys, a good tempo deck should be able to beat you quite easily. That is not a good hand. It is possible I should keep it, because I can draw into things and the Howling Brave makes things better. And in fact, I think I'm going to keep it just mainly because my opponent has mulliganed to 5 here. So I don't want to take the risk of having to do the same, and I'm going to have to get fairly unlucky here. Worst comes to worst, I can always make a massive Howling Brave and kick whatever he makes. But again, it's a bit of a risk keeping this hand, and if I draw Shard off the top, it's going to be pretty awkward. But again, also being on the draw, I'm looking to try and draw into something that's pretty powerful. And speaking of pretty powerful, that Genesis Hydra is fairly good. With Wild Aura on it, it's just going to be a pain. And Survival of the Fittest plus Genesis Hydra is a combo, because the creatures deal damage to each other. So the Genesis Hydra will become a 5/5. Guess what he drew off the top on turn 2? That guy on turn 1 can actually be quite threatening, especially if you've got stuff to back it up. Okay, once again, I've drawn pretty much perfect off the top here, so, whatever. I am tempted at this point to swing with the Howling Brave to see if he's foolish enough to block with his O2. But then I think that, with him being a Shinhare deck and, Wild deck, he could have picked up a Wild Growth or something like that. And given how slow my hand is, I really don't want to just run. I really don't want to throw away my Howling Brave there. But I definitely did think about attacking there. He's going to attack, which is fine. I'm just making sure, because I feel like I'm way ahead. Oh, it's a succulent rooster saw. 1/1 with crush, and you can exhaust another troop you control to give it +1/+1 this turn. You know, it is possible that on many occasions it is actually correct to attack with the Howling Brave there, just to nip in for a bit of damage. And in fact, against a you know, against some players it would be correct to do, because you would because they just would never block under that circumstance. But some players will block there, and also, you know, if you're playing against a colour that's likely to have a lot of tricks, it's probably worthwhile not taking the risk, because the downside of getting blown out there is way higher than the upside of getting a damage in. Okay, so I have my Genesis Hydra in play here, which pretty much means he's blunted. Let's try and think here. If I were him, I would actually consider attacking with the Roost Saw here. Certainly since he's got the +1/+1, it's, you know, he can't just sit on defense forever, because, you know, he's already seen some of the removal and some of the powerful creatures I have, so I don't think he has the late game on me. So I would be, you know, I actually think that he should be going for the, he should be trying to be a bit aggressive here, to tell you the truth. He's got enough chumps to hold me off for a bit, and that Rooster Saw can potentially get very big. I'm also not quite sure how Genesis Hydra's ability works with combat. I'll have to work that out, because I'm not sure if it takes, like, let's say he triple or double blocks here. You know, let's say double. This is a mistake by me, by the way, for what happens now. Let's say he double blocks. He blocks with everything here. Does my guy get the counters before or after he dies, essentially? Yeah, this is a real mistake from me. I should attack and let him act before I use the Survival of the Fittest. Using the Survival of the Fittest there was pointless. It just gives my guy +1/+1, and if he has, I already saw in the game the heroic +8/+8 card. So, you know, why would I give him the chance now to blow me out with it? And I'm actually, I believe I'm realizing in real time at this point why I, you know, the mistake that I've actually made here. And I do think that it's a pretty big mistake here. I've given him, you know, sort of a really big chance to take out one of my best cards. And because I've used it pre-combat, I don't have a, you know, I won't have a follow-up this turn either. So yeah, that was pretty bad from me, and I shouldn't have done it that way. I should have attacked to let him do what he was going to do, and then Survival of the Fittest. Okay, so he makes a 4/3, and this is where the Aeronaut shows its colours, because obviously, you know, a 3/2 flyer for 5 isn't exactly, you know, that's not going to set the world on fire, but the fact that it can have a million different things socketed into it makes it amazing. In Blood Diamond Control, when I try and draft that archetype, I would always pick this card like super highly, because you can give it Rage and essentially turn it into a supersized Thunderbird, which, you know, pretty much anyone who's faced Thunderbird knows what a pain in the backside it is, so obviously making it even bigger is going to be very difficult to deal with, and immune to Zared, which is, you know, one of the big things in this game. Okay, well, he's got no cards in hand now, so I might as well offer him the what looks like a trade. Yeah, I don't even lay Shards pre-combat at this point, so don't want to give anything away. Yeah, if I'm him here, I think I just take 5. I just, you know, it is possible. Just use your life total as a resource. Here, he has the potential to race me. You know, if he can put enough like chumps on the ground, you know, with his run to the litter and things like that, then it's potential he can just race me in the air. I think that this is a really bad block, because again, he gets blown out by Wild Aura there, and that's the game. But if he doesn't block there, he can crack back for like 9 with his 2 guys and have me dead in 2 turns. I mean, obviously I'm going to make Honeycap there, but he can still, you know, if he draws like a couple of runs to the litter or something like that, it's very possible he wins that game. But instead, he just decides to, he's going to put his 2 guys in the bin anyway. You know, I'm going to get a 2-for-1 with it anyway, unless, you know, I mean, I don't know if if my guy gets the counters before the game checks whether it's dead or not. Because in Hex, as opposed to Magic, triggered abilities don't use the chain, they just happen. So if my guy gets the counters pre-combat, he's actually putting his 2 guys in the bin for no reason whatsoever. So, you know, to me, that was just a bad block. He should have just taken 5, used his life total as a resource, and cracked back and tried to see if he can get some chumps on the ground. I'm not killing him that, I'm not killing him that turn, and it's unlikely I'm killing him next turn either. So he had sort of almost the perfect situation where he can hold the ground and, he can crack back in the air. Now, obviously, I had Wild Aura, so I could trample over, but he doesn't know that. I have a pretty much perfect draw here, by the way. 3-drop, 4-drop, 5-drop, plus survival of the fittest in hand. So yeah, it's going to be pretty difficult for my opponent to win this one. But yeah, again, going back to that whole thing, this is one of the things that I think that many guys, certainly you guys who play Hearthstone, who watch the channel for Hearthstone videos, will find very difficult in a game like Hex or like Magic the Gathering when your opponent can cast spells at any time. Because of that, it's not just the numbers that are on the board that you have to be worried about. You have to be worried about what's coming from your opponent's hand, especially against a wild deck. It's like wild decks and diamond decks have a lot of combat tricks that you have to be worried about. Good draw there. I've now got my 4th quote-unquote, well, yeah, my 4th shard, so I can actually play everything. Let's get in there with the Vine Trap. I am tempted to straight up take out his 2/2 here, because Steadfast's an annoying ability that can sometimes lead to you being able to seriously out-tempo your opponent, but I think it's more important, again, develop the board, get some 4/4s down. As far as creature size goes, I'm well ahead of what Diamond can produce at this point. And, if he doesn't do anything this turn, Honeycap's like the worst Buccaneer target in the entire world, because it just comes back down as like a 9/9 as opposed to a 4/4. It's like the ultimate version of delaying the inevitable. And see, here's a problem. My opponent at this point pretty much always has Repel. It's basically a case of, if my opponent doesn't have Repel, I'm going to win, because I'm just going to beat him up for 6 and make another huge guy he can't deal with. If my opponent does have Repel, he's still not committed anything to the board. However, if I didn't have a follow-up here, because I obviously have a follow-up in terms of the Boulder Brute, if I didn't have a follow-up here, I would actually consider not attacking with the Honeycap. And now he blocks with a 2/2, and this, again, it's a case of, why are you blocking here? Yeah, you have this. He has Bravery, which makes it into a 3/3. So the best thing that can happen is that his guy lives. However, again, I've got 4 mana, and it's another complete blowout with Wild Aura. And certainly in the early, certainly in the early days of Hex, from what I can see, it is really, players just are not playing around these combat tricks. And that's a super easy trick to play around. Take 2. You're on 17. That Vine Trap is not going to kill you. Why are you putting let's face it, that guy's very, very good. Especially if you've got a bunch of flyers or something like that. That guy is very, very good. Why are you putting it at risk and costing yourself a card in Bravery just to prevent 2 damage? Because you're not going to kill the 2/4, because you're giving your guy +1/+1. So, that, to me, that was just that was a bad block, like a really bad block. And now it's just given me like massive momentum at this point. It's going to be very, very difficult to see me losing this game. I'm actually tempted to attack with the Howling Brave here to see if I can get a cheeky 1 in. Because, again, he should not block with his 2/2. But then again, you kind of find out what level your opponent's on by the blocks that he makes. And the fact that he blocked in that earlier situation when he had absolutely no reason to, kind of says that my opponent would just shove his 2/2 in front of the 1/1 there. So I'm going to just develop my board at this point and not worry about trying to get the extra single point in. I'm already miles ahead. Okay, so he makes a Pegasus. And, you know, he's sticking on D here, but, you know, either way, this is not going to go well for him. And all right, he's, you know, he's missed his 4th shard drop there, but he's drawn enough in this game to be, you know, easily in this game. And he's kind of made sort of big errors. That's actually an error from me. If I'm going to use that ability, it's actually fine to use that ability. If I was going to use that ability, I should have put it on either the Howling Brave, so that it basically trades with both his guys, or I should have put it on the Vine Trap because it has Crush due to the Wild Aura that's on it. That way I just gave him the opportunity to prevent 4 damage. Well, prevent 6 damage there at that point. So that wasn't really too clever. He decides to take it, which, you know, ballsy. I'll give him that much. So, okay, he puts down the Spear Cliff. And let's see what we get here. I mean, I've been a tad flooded. I mean, I got an amazing start, but since then I've kind of got a bit shard flooded. But hopefully it's not going to be too big of a deal. That's a good draw. So, you know, it just allows me to keep the pressure on. That's what it's mainly important about, especially if your opponent's screwed. If your opponent is screwed, you want to end the game as fast as possible, because if your opponent draws out of the screw, he's going to just have a handful of action and you're not going to have as much. So it is kind of important to sort of bury your opponent quickly if he is mana screwed. And, you know, he does the block I thought he would do. I'm going to take the guaranteed kill here, but again, it's just like combat trick time. And this sort of whole video is going to has been sort of a, you know, how can I put this? It's been basically a homage to how good combat tricks are in Hex. There was an option to clear his board there, but I would have had to lose my Boulder Brute to do it, and I'd rather not. I'd rather have the board like this, to tell you the truth. And he gets his 4th shard, so we'll see what he comes up with. Nothing. So, you know, he could have like double repel here, which you know, would keep him alive this turn, but that's pretty much all he can have. So, you know, if he's got 3 repels and he's drawn them all in his top 14, then congratulations. But if he doesn't, we are going to game 2. And he doesn't. He could also have had the Blinding Light card as well, because we did see 2 of those go past, so it's definitely something I need to be a little bit concerned about. I decided to put the Turbulence in the deck. It looks like he's got quite a few flyers in his deck, so just having a 2-mana kill your guy is pretty good. Just add it to the numerous 2-mana kill your guys that I have in this deck. And I think that's good enough, and we'll go to game 2. Doesn't look like he's made many changes to his deck either. He probably just wants to draw a card. It looks like he's got a fairly solid Diamond Sapphire Flyers deck. You know, if he hadn't have sort of thrown away his Vigilance guy, that game could have been a lot more hair raising, because he gets to like attack with all his flyers without having to worry about me cracking back with big guys. Also, he has a 2/2 in play, you know. And he has Flock of Seagulls, which is annoying more than anything else, but prevents all combat damage that would be done to it. And, you know, guys like this can actually be very awkward to deal with in Limited, especially if you don't have a lot of removal in your deck. You know, if you're like exclusively, let's say, if you're Diamond Sapphire, or like Diamond, maybe not Diamond Wild, you could potentially just have no answer to that and just have to accept that one of your guys is getting brick walled for the rest of the game. However, you know, this deck has several answers, one of which is in my hand, the Survival of the Fittest, and another of which, you know, I have 2 Crazy Squirrel Titans and a Turbulence as well, so I have like 6 answers to that in my deck, so I'm really not that concerned about it. Because he's holding up mana, I'm going to throw the Vine Trap out there first. I don't really want to run my Honeycap into what looks like counter magic. It is possible he's just totally flooded. I mean, we're pretty flooded as well, so, you know, the standard cripple fight, as it's called, basically, in Magic and Hex terms. There's the Aeronaut. He appears to have socketed that one with Swift Strike, I think. I would prefer to have socketed it with Life Drain, personally, rather than Swift Strike. I don't often envisage that thing getting into combat. He's given it +1/+1 with its hero ability. I am actually going to kill it now, while he's tapped out and he doesn't have, you know, while he's out of mana and doesn't have something potentially like counter magic up. I am just going to take his Aeronaut out. It's essentially you know, an ability and a card for an ability and a card, but his card's going to potentially put me under pressure, and I feel like eventually I'm going to draw out of this situation. You know, we both have 4 cards in hand, 5 cards in hand as it is now, and the boards are pretty much blanked, so I think I make a bit of a mistake here. Again, I think what I'm looking for is to try and draw into a test spell to try and protect my Honeycap from getting countered. And I suppose if I cast Honeycap this turn and it gets counter magicked, I can cast it next turn as well. So there's really no point in not trying to throw a Honeycap out there this turn. Because there's, you know, unless he makes something I can't deal with, like a Storm Colossus, there's no way he's not going to have 3 mana up at some point. So yeah, I should have just thrown the Honeycap out there, and if he has counter magic, he has counter magic. Because I am behind at this point, make no mistake about it. That's not bad. I can use it as a test spell for sure, so out you go. I don't think he's going to counter it, even if you could. Well, might as well go for it. Do you have counter magic? No, so that's 12 power in play now, I guess. Now, of course, he could have Repel. It's like I'm 100% prepared for him to have Repel. He could also have Bravery here. Now, those cards in his hand are either Shards, in which case he's just as flooded as we are, or they're probably combat tricks. And my personal guess is that they're combat tricks. So let's see. They could also just be Shards as well, you know. He could be like, we've drawn 9, he could have drawn 10, you know. It's just the way things are, unfortunately, sometimes. Well, I guess we're going to find out, because that will probably win me the game if it resolves. Yeah, he's got nothing. So I'm going to kill the flock of seagulls, because, you know, he's just going to just stall my Honeycap forever if you know, if he doesn't if it stays out. So I'm quite happy with doing that, and he doesn't have Repel either, so you know, I think this game is this game's pretty over. My opponent's got a pretty awful draw. To be fair, my draw's not been too much better. It's just that I drew the Crazy Squirrel Titan when I desperately needed it, and I think it's just a case that my guys are just a lot bigger than his guys. Diamond Aura is definitely something to be a little bit worried about, because of the fact that he is if he has anything to sort of stop me here, it's now possible that he could kill me in 2 turns. It doesn't look. I don't think he can have anything for 1 mana though. So it's possible he survives this next turn, but he's going to have to kill his 2/2 in order to do it. He could have. We've already seen one Heroic Righteousness, but if there was another one, I think that's how he potentially wins this. He can block with his 2/2 and Heroic Righteousness and deal enough to. I don't know why he didn't kill the 3/3 there, but deal enough to kind of live, and then he cracks back and has some kind of pump spell to deal me 8 damage. But it doesn't look like that's what's going to happen. Cards are now on the table. Everything is now on the table. And yeah, that's a pretty ominous sight when you're on 1 life. Okay, he attacks for 5, putting me to 3. I think that if it had got a good draw and it was played well, this blue-white flyers deck could give me a real, this would give me some real problems. But in this situation, I'm afraid that, and again, of course, if he has the, forgotten what it's called, if he has Blinding Light here, of course he wins. He's given me a GG, but I'm going to wait until my guys go in to accept it, and that is it. So thanks very much for watching, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this more sort of educational Hex broadcast, and we'll be back with, I'm sure, a few more in the future. So until then, this is Boomer for Caravel Gaming, and take care, guys.